If you're new, welcome, and if you've seen my other videos, welcome back. On this channel, we've already talked about this unsustainable but significant rise in support for One Nation. We've talked about some of the more extremist supporters in this new right-wing populist movement, but we've yet to have a measured conversation about why so many Australians are connecting with Pauline Hanson and One Nation's messaging. If you attribute this rise to racism alone, you're missing the broader difficulties that Australia is experiencing. The rise in support for One Nation does not come from a place of hatred. It comes from a place of fear and people no longer trusting their government. Well, and also a little bit of hatred. Immigration is not something Pauline Hanson, One Nation, or its supporters are inherently against. We have to be fair to Pauline. She's only against all Muslim immigration. Everything else is fine within reason. Genuinely though, for a lot of One Nation supporters, their issue is with the current level of immigration. And if we're being honest, that's really an issue that's ranging across the political spectrum. There's this current fear that Australia is experiencing this mass migration that is going to lead to younger Aussies never being able to afford a home or creating this feeling of people being replaced. And at face value, I don't think there's anything wrong with worrying about the number of people coming into your country. It's fair to be concerned about the future of your country. That shows you care and that you want the best future for the place you call home. And some people really do long for the days of their childhood. I don't think there is anyone better to represent old Australia than really the living personification of the White Australia policy. Aside from the questionable statements causing division, one of the bigger concerns is the fact that, in my opinion, Pauline Hanson is knowingly manipulating these people to gain political power. One Nation doesn't need to have good or comprehensive policies because that's not why people are supporting them. They're supporting One Nation because currently they are the party that is giving people temporary hope. So we're all on the same page. Australia's got a population of around 27 million and we take in about 185,000 permanent residents per year. That's a population of about 0.67%. If we include temporary residency, we get an increase of about 1.13% per year based on immigration alone. If we're distorting numbers to the point where we're considering that increase mass migration, every single guy on Hinge who's 5'5" gets to round that up to 6 foot, because clearly numbers and words don't mean anything anymore. When politicians or commentators use that word, mass migration, they're doing it to make people feel scared, to make them think that Australia is getting unsustainably flooded with immigrants, when although it is relatively high within the OECD region, it's not unprecedented and unmanageable. And don't get me wrong, I understand why even that 1.13% increase is too much for some people, even if it is manageable. It's scary when rental affordabilities are hitting record lows. The cost of buying a house keeps increasing. Wages are not keeping up with inflation. And you know the economy is bad because I haven't seen an Adrian Portelli ad since last year. And when you look at population growth, including births, it feels even scarier. That's around 1.5 to 1.8% per year. And when the current number of dwellings being constructed is around 200,000 per year, it does feel unsustainable. That if you want the housing market to catch up, you'd want that population growth closer to around 1 to 1.3% to reduce that housing squeeze. But in some good news, not only is Gen Z getting laid at such a low rate that our birth rate is almost certainly gonna go down, but Labor is putting significant effort into ensuring that more homes are being built, whilst also trying to reduce the number of people coming into this country per year. But that can be difficult when you still need to bring people in to make sure you have skilled workers to build the homes or keep the Australian economy strong. And I get why people don't trust Labor to do this effectively. Historical failures from the majors are one of the core reasons we're in this issue. Everyone seems to have a housing plan, but no one really seems to have a comprehensive housing policy or solution. But the idea that Pauline Hanson is the one who somehow figured that out, that doesn't make any sense when you look at her voting history across a range of policies that would have made housing cheaper. And that's if she even shows up to the parliament at all. If you or I showed up to work as little as she did, we'd get fired. And let's again be explicitly clear, One Nation is not against immigration in and of itself. Barnaby Joyce has talked about the need for skilled immigration. They don't want it reduced to zero, but they do want to reduce the total number of people coming to this country to 130,000. A reduction in the number of people coming to this country doesn't sound unreasonable, but it's never as simple as Pauline makes it out to be. Sustaining that number would mean denying people bringing their family here when their family is dependent on them. Just because some people aren't welcome at their family reunions doesn't mean that's a universal experience, and both morally and practically, that's a bad thing for Australia to do. It will disincentivize people wanting to come to this country, and you might think that's a good thing, but economically speaking, it harms us in the long run. It would require a cut to our skilled immigration scheme, and even a reduction in 25,000 skilled immigrants is gonna lead to a $10 billion loss in tax revenue by the 2040s. I don't know about you, I like having money to afford public services that make this country great. You can feel how you want about immigration, but the fact of the matter is we greatly benefit from it. Immigrants typically come to this country when they already have an education, so it's not a cost on the system, and a lot of the time, these people will go back to their home countries before they need aged care. On average, a skilled immigrant, or an immigrant generally, will add more to the Australian economy than they will take compared to a natural-born citizen. And I in no way mean to say that our current skilled immigration scheme is perfect. There's actually some major flaws. It sounds nice to hear that 71% of those 185,000 permanent residency positions are for skilled immigration. But when you realize that under that 71%, it also includes the family members of those skilled workers, you realize pretty quickly we're not bringing in as many skilled workers for construction or other necessary industries as the government wants you to think. It does not shock me that older Aussies who have got to have the Australian dream watching their grandchildren or potentially even their children struggle in this current cost of living crisis and this housing crisis, only hear the government make promises about bringing in skilled workers to fix the issue, when in reality, the numbers are incredibly overblown. It makes sense for them to look to a party like One Nation. But again, when you look at how Pauline Hanson or One Nation has typically voted, how can you trust her? People say they want a difference, but the reality is that One Nation votes in line with the Liberals a significant amount of the time. Pauline's voting history, again, does not indicate that she advocates for policies that are actually gonna make this country better. It's smoke and mirrors. A lot of Pauline's policies really do rely on no one checking the maths. I'll happily take Pauline scrapping the excise tax on beer and spirits, but when we make more money from those taxes than we do our natural gas, you gotta tell me how we can afford to get rid of it. Now, obviously, in that case, the bigger issue and moral failure is the tax loopholes we let these giants get away with. But still, I'm all in favor of the pub being cheaper, but you gotta tell me how you're gonna pay for it. That's a real theme across One Nation's policies. They sound really good on paper, but for a party that is so anti-capitalism, I feel like I have to remind them nothing is ever truly free. I'll happily support One Nation wanting to remove the GST on building materials under a certain threshold, but again, how does that deal with the workforce shortage and the material shortage? It sounds nice when they say they want to remove or reduce stamp duty, but that's a state and territories thing. The federal government does not have control over that. And maybe the federal government wants to pay out the states to remove it. But again, where are you gonna get the money? One Nation doesn't believe in climate change. They want to pull us out of things like the Paris Climate Accord, which is gonna tank our trade relationships with other nations, and specifically our neighbors in the Pacific, who are gonna be some of the first impacted by climate change. Hanson wants to roll back laws that protect women's access to medical services like abortion, but again, most of the time, that's a state issue. She can't actually do anything. She's selling you a pipe dream when the reality is she doesn't really have much control over the things she promises she's gonna fix or change. And I get it, sometimes it's safer and feels better to hold on to this unrealistic dream if it gives you hope. But eventually, you gotta look at things as they actually are. I understand that for genuinely a lot of people, They don't care about One Nation's policies at all. For them, it truly and wholly is a protest vote, a way of showing the majors that they are sick of the status quo and that something needs to change. But their vote does have power, and in my opinion, it's going to be one of those classic moments where you are cutting off your nose to spite your face. Pauline Hanson does not have a good or comprehensive policy to assist with the cost of living crisis or the housing crisis. Her way of resolving these things is to blame it on immigration, but her policies around immigration don't particularly make much sense and are going to hurt us in the long run. The uncomfortable reality is there probably is not a nice, clean solution to the crisis Australia is facing. And at some point, some particular demographic is going to have to suffer. And it seems like realistically, that probably needs to be older Australians who have investment properties. We need to change things like the capital gains tax exemption or negative gearing. And it's interesting that none of Pauline Hanson's solutions focus on those elements of the housing crisis, because disproportionately, individuals who are more likely to benefit from those programs are her voter base. But hey, let me know what you think in the comments, like and subscribe, check out the other videos. It's been real.